Hello students, I'm Aanchal Sharma, your educator. In this video, we are going to talk about another Indian poet, and today we are going to talk about N Daruwalla. So N Daruwalla, this is the picture of N Daruwalla. Let us read something about him. So N Daruwalla was born on 24th January in 1937. He is an Indian poet and a short story writer in English as well. He is also a former Indian police service officer. He was awarded Sahitya Akademi Award in 1984 for his poetry collection, The Keeper of the Dead. And this was given by the Sahitya Akademi, India's National Academy of Letters. But later he returned this award. He was also awarded Padma Shri, the fourth highest civil award, in 2014. So N Daruwalla is someone who was born in Lahore, but he later then came to India. So he is someone who has seen both the paths before the independence era as well, and he has seen after the independence era as well. Because of this, we see that N Daruwalla's poetry is very sharp. It is very satiric. He has seen so much pain. Also, as he used to travel from one place to another because of his father's posting, and because of his posting as well, as he was a police officer, he could write about the inner depths of our country. So he was not looking at the world from the topmost level, but from the very grassroots level. Because of this, you'll see that all of his poetries are against the communal problems that are going on, against emergency period that are going on at that point of time. Also, as he was a police officer, he has seen the problems with his own naked eyes. And because of this, all of his poetry are very satiric, right? And he was very strong. So there are different poets who have called him even like a lion as well. So he was as strong as a lion. Naseem Ezekiel said this about him. He was someone who came forward and talked about the inner structure and the inner problems of our country, right? So he is someone who was given Sahitya Akademi Award for The Keeper of the Dead, and he was also given the Padma Shri. This is N Daruwalla. So the Writers Workshop Company, and he was also a part of the Writers Workshop Company. It was founded by these 8 members, 8 writers who came up together, like Lal, or you can also call him as P. Lal, Deb Kumar Das, Anita Desai, and many more. They came together and started to write about the different poetry collection. They started to write about different, about the different conditions that India is facing at that point of time. And they call themselves as the Writers Workshop. They started it, and it was none other than P. Lal, who was a professor of English at St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, who was the founder, who he initiated this Writers Workshop, and later many more writers were added to it, and all of them were writing about the problems that India was facing at that point of time. So the Writers Workshop in India has published the first books by many of the authors who gave and who became very famous later. So there are writers like A.K. Ramanujan, there are writers like Asif Kiramboy, Aga Shahid Ali, Adil Juswala, Arun Kolatkar, even Chitra Banerjee Devakarni, Jeev Patel, and Kamla Das, Meena Alexander, and more famous can be Shiv Kumar, Naseem Ezekiel, Pratish Nandi. There is Ruskin Bond, R. Parthasarthi, and Vikram Seth, and William Hall. All of them were included, and they write the golden treasury of the Writers Workshop poetry in India, right? So they all came together, and they at that point of time were writing about the contemporary problems that were going on. Even Jayanta Mahapatra or N Daruwalla were all part of it, and they all wrote about the problems that our country was facing at that point of time. Now, these are the few themes that you will always see in the poetry of Daruwalla. First of all, coming from a Parsi family and father who used to travel, he being in a police job, he used to travel. So when he used to travel, he became the writer or a poet of this urban era. So his posting was mostly in the northern part of India, and many of his poetry collections talk about the problems that were going on. He will write about the different terrains, he will write about plains, he will write about the beautiful landscapes. Not only that, he will write about how there are problems going on from the grassroots level as well, and all of them will be very satirical. So in his poetry, Daruwalla will depict the communal rights that were going on. He will touch upon the Great Hunger of 1974. He will talk about the emergency of 1974. So after his after the independence, as I told you, he was someone who has seen the before independence India and after independence India, and has seen these three major events as well. He has anger, and he has anger for the problems that are going on, and all of these in a satirical manner are seen in his poetry. He calls himself, and many people call him as a landscape poet. He writes about the different historical events and will write about the different literary sources as well in his poetry. So he draws from historical events and literary sources. He is very satiric. Poetry is composed not only in the cerebral cortex, but the digestive tracts as well. And this is a quote K.N. Daruwalla himself says. He said that I am not only writing poetry to appeal, to give pleasure, or not only for your mind or for your soul, but for the very body. I'm writing so that you can be moved, so that you can see the greater problems that we are grappling. So poetry is composed not only in the cerebral cortex, but the digestive tracts as well. How can you digest the problems in which we are living? How can you live in these problematic conditions are what he is trying to talk about. Hence, I told you he is also a urban poet, and many people call him as a landscape poet also. He writes about contemporary India, all the socio-political conditions that we go through. And it is Naseem Ezekiel who calls him as the person who has energy of a lion. This also can be asked. So Naseem Ezekiel calls him a poet who has energy of a lion, who comes forward and talks about the problem in a very ironical manner. So he has a savage irony. He's very observational because of his job. He has visited a lot of places, and also he talks about the political hypocrisy that was going on, how the government is playing with the people, how there are so many problems, and it is the divide that is increasing, the rich and the poor, right? So these are the few themes that he talks about. Now, some poetry and some themes you should know. So covering a wide range of themes, Daruwalla portrays vividly and minutely the contemporary Indian socio-political world, which touches of irony and sarcasm, with a touch of irony and sarcasm. So he's very sarcastic and he's very ironic. He exposes the evils of the communal tensions, the rights, the exploitation, greed. There is the criminalization of the different politics, dowry, etc. Communal violence causes disintegration of the social life, and this is seen in his poetry, The Curfew in the Right Town City. The poems from Terai, The Curfew, and Walking to the Center reflect Daruwalla's professional experiences of being in police as well. In Migrations, this is itself a work. So these highlighted things are the works that he has. So in Migration, he deals with the themes of disintegration of the village community. Now, yes, he's not only writing about the urban terrain, but in this urban terrain, you also have some rural parts. So there also will be something about the different village community, about the different problems, about the plains, about the vegetation that he will encounter. In Deep Anguish at the institutional corruption in this pre-India, he shows his anger in poetries like Hunger, the monologue in the Chambal Valley, Hawk, and Food and Words. So these are few poetry that are very prominent, and all of them will touch upon the problems of your dowry or your communal tensions, of all these post-independent Indian problems that we were encountering at that point of time. How recklessly the communal problems are going on and how much disintegrated the urban life and the rural life are. Or he also talks about the criminalization of the politics, how the rich is becoming richer and the poor is still very poor. Then the poet is very much concerned about the socio-political condition. So the social concern, compassion and sympathy are very evident, but he will do that in an ironical manner. The most remarkable poems are those which reflect on the poet's social concern and his compassion, and because he knows that we Indians are nothing but victims of that point, of that scenario, of that partition. In this context, the poem entitled The Ghagra in the Spate is very important. And then there is pestilence, that is also very important. It naturally occurs that there is the problems that we are going through. In the first named poet, the havoc worked by the flood in the Ghagra is the main theme that the poem talks about. So this poem brings before us the minds and the acute distress, the misery that is seen of the villagers who have been starving and there is no food and they are just living there. In the pestilence, the poet depicts the misery that is caused by the epidemic and cholera. So as he had been, I told you, in the police, so he used to have his posting from one place to another, and because of this he can talk about the damage that is caused because of no rain, because of different floods, or maybe because of the starvation conditions that are going on, maybe because of the epidemic like cholera that the places are hit by. So in all of these poetry, you will find that there are these at the grassroots level, the problems are there, and he's writing about those kinds of problems. A remarkable feature of Daruwalla's poetry is his ability to vividly show all the abstractions, materialize all abstractions to strike a very creative tension between image and the statement. His poetry has a narrative energy, and they can also sweep the person. A landscape of meaninglessness is what he is showing, right? He, like Kafka, is talking about what is this going on in front of us? Like, why are we living in this world when we are not getting anything? He is talking about the post-independence India, a landscape of meaningless. Then why should I be treated the Kafka beat or the wasteland? Then the mother, you are near at hand, one vast swelling defeat. So these are few lines that are important from his poetries, and you will always encounter that he is vividly showing the problems that we go through and the problems that the post-independence India was going through, the tension that is created by the images. His landscape is extended from the ancient kingdom to the very great Indian empire Ashokas, and then it is coming to the metropolitan city of the modern Bombay also. So you see that there are different landscape that he is talking about, different historical events that he is talking about. It is not only one skewed image that he is giving in his poetry collections. His first book of poetry was Under Orient, which was published by the Writers' Workshop, India in 1970, and it is very important. Under Orient, it came out in 1970, and then he went on to publish his second collection, Apparition in April, in 1971, for which he was given the Uttar Pradesh State Award in 1972. His poems appeared in many poetry anthologies and they were very famous, like the Contemporary Indian Poetry that was edited by Menka, and he also received few of his poetries. A part was devoted to his poetry, and they were published in different anthologies, right? So these being very important. Then the Sahitya Academy Award winning collection of poems, that is The Keeper of the Dead, came out in 1982, and it is remarkable, and very thematically he talks about the problems that are there in the contemporary India. The Summer of Tigers is another collection of poems, and it came out after a very long silence of 8 years. Then after a break of 8 years, he will write The Summer of Tigers, and here he will talk about the different historical conditions. His poetry will talk about how we are facing problems, and biblical images are also sometimes used in the poetry. With the publication of 2 short story collections, he also came forward, and these short story collections are The Sword and Abyss. It came out in 1979, and The Minister of Permanent Unrest and Other Stories. It came out in 1996. So as I told you, he is also a short story writer and someone who writes poetry. So two of his short story collections became important, The Sword and Abyss and The Minister of Permanent Unrest. It came out in 1979 and the latter one came out in 1996. So Daruwalla has shown that he is equally amazing in writing the different stories. His stories made no less impact than his poetry. The Minister of the Permanent Unrest, the title story, demonstrates the skill, and the other stories are set in the dim historical faraway places. So he used historical references. Beside this, the Sahitya Academy Award was given to him, as I told you, in 1984. He also received the Commonwealth Poetry Prize, and this was given in 1987 for his volume Landscapes. So he received Sahitya Academy Award. He also received the Commonwealth Prize, and this was given for his volume Landscape. Padma Shri was also given to him. Now, his most recent work came out in 2002 and it is The Map Maker. Offers a very compelling series of dramatic monologues by figures of wide ranges. There are diverse disciplines, like there is Buddha, there is the old map maker, and they all will come forward and will talk about their own passions. And there you will see that there is an amalgamation of a culture and historical milieu that he is talking about. So through this philosophical notion, he will talk about the time and space. He will fascinate you with the different historical conditions, and it will compare, the historical world with the modern world. So you will see that in this poetry collection, The Map Maker, there are diverse, variety of people coming together and talking about themselves, like Buddha. From different disciplines, they will come together and will talk about themselves, and we will get an insight about the philosophical world, the inner world of all of these people. Now, there are some books and poetry collections that are important. Under Orion, it was published by the Writers' Workshop. It is the first work, very important. It came out in 1970. Then Apparition in April. Then we have Sword and Abyss. It's a short story collection. Winter Poems is also important. All of his major poems are also published at one place, right? Then there is The Keeper of the Dead, Crossing the River, Landscape. So he received Commonwealth Prize for Landscape and Sahitya Academy for The Keeper of the Dead, but he later returned the Sahitya Academy Award. Then A Summer of Tigers, it's another poetry collection. Night River, The Map Maker, The Scarecrow and the Ghost, For Pepper and Christ, and other Serving to Solitudes, Letters to Mama, right? So these are few works of our writer. Let us quickly see what we have done till now. So this is K. N. Daruwalla, as I told you, and he has written many short stories and many poetry collections. The Keeper of the Dead, being very famous, received Sahitya Academy Award, and he has also been awarded with Padma Shri. All of his poetries were first published by the Writers' Workshop, and these writers were talking about the different problems that were going on in the post-independence India only. Also, these are the few themes that are very important that we discuss. He talks about the communal rights, the great hunger at that point of time, emergency, and he is also called as an urban poet or a landscape poet. He himself says that the poetry is composed not only in the cerebral cortex, but it should be so much so that you cannot even digest the facts, but the digestive tracts as well. Right? So he is an urban poet who is writing about the contemporary Indian socio-political condition. Naseem Ezekiel calls him that he has an energy of a lion. He writes his poetry with savage irony, with observational taste, and he will politically critique India at that point of time. So these are the few poetry that are important. And at the end, we discuss these poetry collections. And at the end, you can take screenshots and write that these are few books that are important. These are the poetry collections that he has written, right? So I hope you understood what I had for you in this video. There are a lot of facts, I know. If you make your own notes, the things would be very clear to you. I hope you liked it. If you have any doubt, you can write it in the comment section. Also, one question I have for you. There is one poetry collection or one book that he has written, and I want you to write the name of it, and one movie is based on it. So the movie Refugee was based on that poetry collection, and it was written by Daruwalla only. So in the comment section, I want you to write the name of it as well. And I want you to keep on revising the things because paper is just around the corner. Thank you so much. If you have any doubts, you can write it in the comment section. Thank you so much.